Hi! So, in the last time I did a Oh Hello's album, I did a video at the end talking about my experience with what the album was about. I thought that was fun to do. I didn't really plan to do it with this one, but then I thought, there is something in this album that I think that I personally relate to, and I'm sure a lot of other people do. So, Through the Deep Dark Valley is an album, as I've said in my video descriptions, about leaving the past sins of your fathers or ancestors, or just the original sin of man, if you want to go back to the Garden of Eden, which the album does do, in Like the Dawn and in I Was Wrong. And going out of the valley of the shadow of death, the deep, dark valley, into the light up the mountain, as it were, of God's grace and truth. And the song "The Truth is a Cave" talks about how the truth was a cave on the mountainside out of reach for someone because they lived in legalism and they just didn't get it, and then they realized later the truth isn't a dark cave, it's the freedom. And the album also talks about God's calling and the difference between listening to God and listening to your earthly father. Like the song I Was Wrong also says, I was torn between my God and my father. So obviously I'm a Christian. So the way this album kind of speaks to me personally is I grew up in church, like a lot of Christians did, of course, and was told about God. But I went to like 3 different churches from like childhood to adulthood. 4 now, counting the one I'm currently going to. And my parents hopped around searching for different churches a couple of times during my life. So I got to hear a lot of different ways of talking about God because of that. And I also was part of a homeschooling group with Mormons, so they also have a very different perspective on God. Plus, they read lots of books with different religions, different worldviews in them. And what this ended up leading to was a lot of conflicting views of how to serve God, what God is really like. And especially as I got older, a difference between my view of him and my parents' view of him, there just got to be more and more of a difference. Not really doctrinally, I would say, just more in how we thought God is personally, because Christianity is a religion of God is very personal friend or father to you, depending on what your favorite term is. There's a lot. But some people, their experience of fathers is very hard and challenging, sometimes even abusive. And some people, they have the great supportive father, and that's kind of, I think, where my views were altered, because I've experienced God much more in the kind sense, and I know a lot of people who experienced him more in the harsh sense. I don't think there's anything to do with what God is like so much as what people interpret him to be based on what other people have told them and what their experience with their parents was. So the valley had an interesting meaning to me because it seems to be describing both somebody who goes the way of the world, which is what most of us think of as sinful way, if you're familiar with that term, sleeping around, drinking, gambling, squandering your money, everything the prodigal son story describes, and probably much, much, much more. This is not the age of innocence, but I don't need to go into a lot of detail. We all could probably think of a lot of perverted things, but I don't want to say that. The point is that stuff, the stuff that everyone talks about or makes jokes about, or is oh, so gross. So there's that son, and then there's the other son who's the good son, but he doesn't really understand the father's heart in the story, why he's so forgiving of his second son, and why doesn't he love the first son for obeying him more. And the father kind of puts him in his place a little bit by saying, like, I love both of you. You already have all this stuff, but your brother lost everything and he's coming back, so we're going to welcome him. And we're not really told what the first son, whether that changed his mind or not. It's kind of just like puts the question to the people listening, like, what do you think? And so, of course, growing up in church, I kind of had that dual experience. It's like there's some people who are like, God forgives everything, you know, and other people are like, you better not screw up because it's very, very bad consequences if you do. And then the other message of the album, which is leaving the sins of the fathers, is I think the more personal one for me, because I was never bothered that much by the doctrinal differences between churches. Not like some people are. I mean, it's annoying, you know. I wish that there was an easy way for everyone to understand, but that's just not how truth works. But when it comes to the sins of the fathers, it's something called generational sins in many parts of the church. I mean, you could also call it psychological, learned habits, trauma, all that fun stuff. And that's kind of just where you start imitating all the bad behavior that you see growing up. And sometimes it's stuff that runs in your family, like for generations, like alcoholism, doing drugs, like many people, it's like divorce, that kind of thing. It's like from one generation to the next, those patterns repeat themselves. And the Valley kind of starts off with the people singing, bemoaning the fact that they didn't choose all these crimes to be handed down to them, and yet they still inherited those crimes and those habits and those mindsets. And they're asking God, will you lead us out of this into something better? Which is a message of the gospel. In a nutshell, it's like we've inherited sin because of Adam. Will you lead us out of sin into freedom through Jesus? And that is the prodigal son story as well, that we can be restored to our former glory. So for me, that's very important because I've seen a lot of things growing up that I don't want to imitate. And like, I don't have to. Of course, you're gonna sometimes find yourself acting like your parents. Sorry if this is news to you, or like your grandparents, or like your great-grandparents. I don't know, how far back do you know? Depend. And that can be a good thing sometimes, but other times it's not. And a lot of people grow up vowing, I will never act like my parents, and then they act like their parents, or they act worse than their parents sometimes because you add your own flaws to the ones you learn from your parents, and it's very discouraging. In fact, you all know, some of you, that I'm a big My Hero Academia fan, so it's kind of Todoroki's backstory in a nutshell, and he's one of my favorite characters because of that. Like, he doesn't want to be like Endeavor, but then he realizes during the licensing exam that he has become like Endeavor by trying not to be like Endeavor, and that is exactly where a lot of us wake up, kind of, is like, wow, I have begun acting like my father, my mother, hoping for more with that. But in my personal life, I found that the only real way to put it into that cycle is to find peace in the fact that it doesn't have to continue, that you've been given a way out, and that it can be as simple as just in the moment realizing I can make a different choice. Because there will be that thing running through your head, I'm sure. I'm not the one who's experienced this, where you remember your parents did it, you want to do it, but at the same time when you do it, you're like horrified because why did I do that? And some people never make it out of that cycle because they just accept that they can't help themselves. But there is a way. You can in the moment choose not to do that. For me personally, praying, remembering what the Bible says is a huge part of what enables me to make those decisions. And do I still sometimes fail? Of course I do. Sometimes I say things that my parents said to me, or that I've heard other people in my family say, and I'm like, why did I say that? I don't think there's a single person in the world who's grown up with their actual parents who hasn't had that experience. And I'm pretty sure there's not a single one of us who's not sometimes embarrassed by it. But your parents don't define you. At least they don't have to. So that's my message for the end of Into the Valley. And if you watch this video, hey, thanks for watching it. Thanks for caring about my life. Because I'm a stranger on the internet. You don't have to. And I hope this was encouraging to you, or at least interesting, or maybe gave you a different perspective on the album that you hadn't thought of before. And please check out more Oh Hello albums. They have Notos, Eurus, and the one I already did, which is Dear Wormwood. Check out my playlist, which I'll probably link here, to my Oh Hello songs if you want to do that. And I am planning on doing the other two albums, and probably, maybe there's singles. I'll see. I kind of like the trees one, so maybe I'll do that. Or check out my other videos if you really like sign language and you want to see more of that. And I also have helpful sign language, where I just explain a little bit about how sign language works. And I need to do another one of those videos soon, but I haven't decided what to do yet. Anyway, so that is all. Thank you for the support. Please share this video if you want to, or like, subscribe, or just leave it here.